Like I said, myself, I'm the Executive Vice President of Titan, and the two gentlemen here with me tonight. Ray Pohl is our Director of Training Development. Ray is going to lead the presentation tonight, over 30 years in private security. My favorite thing about Ray is he's a 5th degree black belt, and he's in the Hall of Fame, so don't mess with him. He's a certified in nonviolent crisis intervention and cultural institution protection. Joining us as well is Vince Genualdi, who's Director of our Park Security Team at Millennium Park. Vince has 24 plus years of experience in the police and law enforcement. He's retired recently, Deputy Chief of the Niles Police Department. He ran their active shooter rapid deployment and has 6 years of homicide detective task force experience, and members of other certified organizations, distinguished member of other organizations as well. So I think we're lucky to have these two gentlemen here tonight to take us through this very serious subject matter. We will have time for questions as well. But if there are items that you want to discuss, please feel free to interrupt and we'll go through there. We will show a brief video from the Department of Homeland Security. It's about 3.5 minutes to give you a brief overview of what they consider to be best practice in handling an active shooter as well. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Ray.
Before I put the microphone up, can you hear me okay? No. So you need the microphone? I don't do well with microphones, but we'll see. Okay. Thank you. All right. So what we want to do is we want to define active shooter incidents. What happens is the Department of Homeland Security over the last several years has, it's kind of been a live system, and they've been updating their terminology so that we understand some things. We'll go through it in just a minute. So we'll define it. I'm not a big person about statistics unless it's applicable to us. So I'm going to go through some statistics that are pretty important that will help you to understand. We do have the video. We're going to talk about what to do when you respond. I like asking questions rather than telling you what to do. Why? Okay. And not only that, I'm not going to be there to tell you what to do. So I'll ask a few questions. We'll see how it goes. It's not about getting it right, wrong, or otherwise. And I don't know if there is really a right answer, but I like participation. I like getting people thinking a little bit. Any questions before we keep going here? All right. So an active shooter is defined as an individual actively engaged in attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area, typically through the use of a firearm. Why is that so difficult? Well, let me ask you a question. We're going to voluntold you today. I'm sorry. We were married up until yesterday. She divorced me. Can you believe she left me? Oh my gosh. I can't believe it either. So now if I come into the church and I shoot her and then I shoot myself, is that an active shooter? I guess so. Well, it doesn't say person. It says people. So is that domestic violence? And this is the problem that Department of Homeland Security has had in defining what an active shooter actually is. And what they've done is over the last, well, since this really started, really getting popular back with Columbine, they've tracked and metrics a bunch of information, and there's some really shocking things that we're going to talk about tonight that they actually found out about. Does that make sense? Okay, so we'll go through that. So what we find is that there's different types of active shooters: workplace-related, mentally unstable, domestic, terrorist attack, and criminal attacks. Now, I've been doing this presentation all over the United States for years and years and years. When we first put this together, there was a thought of what the most common was. What do you think is the most common type of active shooter up there? Believe it or not, most active shooters are mentally stable. They would pass a sanity test. So that's kind of where we were thinking too, but yeah. So what's your next thought? Domestic is by far number one. Back then we didn't realize that it was going to actually rate that high. When we first started putting this together, we were thinking of criminal acts and terrorist attacks. Those were actually what we thought would be the main. But what we found is domestic is number one, workplace related is number two. So just some thoughts there. All right, when we look at these statistics, if you look at active shooter incidents from 2000 to 2006, you see we averaged about 6.5 per year. Then we go from 2007 to 2013, and we're up to 16.5 per year. Now the latest statistics over the last several years show that we're up to now 20 per year. So what does that mean?
Increasing.
It is increasing, absolutely. And it's been, if you notice, over the last several years, 2014, it's been pretty steady though. So I think that's pretty good. Hopefully we'll start heading on our way down. I love these statistics. This is pretty interesting. All but 6 shooters were male. Only 2 incidents involve more than 1 shooter. Why is it then that so many incidents are reported that multiple shooters? Why do you think that is? Well, it's only 1 shooter though, but confusion. Somebody said it. Hey, how many people have shot a firearm? And when you do, it's usually where? At a firing range, okay, or out on a farm. The echo, yeah. A lot of times a gun may go off over here, and because of the way it echoes off of buildings, it may sound like it actually came from 1 or more places, and it may sound like 1 or more weapons. Almost a quarter of the incidents ended with the perpetrator committing suicide. 83% of incidents, the shooter was incapacitated. So this is one such incident which involved this gentleman, killed 26 and injured 20 others. He was wounded by a citizen and then ultimately committed suicide. He was actually prohibited from law enforcement from purchasing firearms, so that's really big. You know, the thing is there are a lot of systems out there, but the thing is accurate communication and reporting is huge. The Air Force failed to record the conviction, and he went to a martial arts instructor and signed up for karate classes because he was being bullied. So here's the one that really stands out, though. A strange second wife sometimes attended the church in which with her family. Prior to this shooting, he sent threatening text messages. So that's pretty important. There's a lot of warnings out there that we sometimes don't identify. We're going to get to this a little bit later. I'm going to touch on it right now. But we always say, if you see something, say something. If you notice something different about a person, mention it. Well, the thing is, what are the things that we want to look for that are different in a person? What do you think?
The way they're talking or saying things.
If they're normally very communicative and now they don't, or maybe they're quiet and now they talk a lot. But there's actually something called trigger events. And those trigger events are life-changing incidents in their life, whether it be loss of a loved one, a divorce, loss of job, financial, things of that nature. Those are some of the things that are trigger events, okay? We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So, characteristics of a shooter: prior history of mental illness, drug or alcohol dependence, patterns of behavior is what we're looking for. Self-esteem issues, easily displays anger, feels isolated or withdraws. The big thing is that we're going to start noticing a pattern. And a lot of times it starts with a collector of grievances, and he wants to right this wrong. So when somebody comes in that decides to become an active shooter, how long do you think they've prepared to do it? What's a while? I want to... It could be days, weeks, months, or even years, yes. Let me ask you a question. Has anybody ever conducted surveillance on your church? If Vince and I have been in here, then yes. We walked in, nobody stopped me, doors were open, I walked around, we came up, we found and got started. Yeah. So the thing is that you do it too. You pay attention to these things. The problem is that these bad guys, they have bad intentions, and they're not doing it for good reasons, obviously. So this is basically the pattern. There's a grievance, starts to get the idea, does the planning and preparation, and what we're focusing on in today's presentation is the act of violence itself. What we really want to do is help you to recognize these things before it gets to that point where there's an act of violence. If we can focus on that, we might be able to prevent a lot of these incidents from occurring. This is my favorite slide. It says a lot, doesn't it? So this is a watch. How long does an active shooter event go on for? 2 minutes. Somebody said that very quickly. How long? 2 minutes. 4 minutes. What did you say? Why 23 seconds? Are you a Michael Jordan fan? Or because it's another, okay, I like that you're paying attention. Why do you need to know this, do you think? Yeah, don't you think that it would affect some of the decisions you might make? If it's 23 seconds as opposed to 2.5 hours like Columbine? So when we first start looking at the incidents that occurred, Columbine was the big one. And it took 2.5 hours for the police to enter that school. They were actually on Gen 1 response tactics then. Police show up, they set up a perimeter, wait for SWAT to arrive, establish communication, and then try to go in. That took 2.5 hours. There was another shooting in Colorado, the Aurora shooting, the movie theater. Do you remember that? I always ask this question. What do you remember about that shooting? Anything in particular? Yeah, everybody remembers the movie, okay? Why? Because they said that's why he attacked that theater. It might have had something to do with it, but did you know he passed 2 or 3 other theaters to get to that one? Why did he go by the other theaters? No, see, this theater had a little sticker on the front window that said, "No concealed carry allowed." And he said that the other 2 didn't, and he was afraid that if he went in and started shooting, that people may shoot back. A lot of people think that having that sticker on the window or on your door is going to prevent an active shooter situation. Well, what's he doing in there with a gun? Well, he's a bad guy. He's not going to listen to a sticker. Does that make sense? So just some thoughts there. Oh, I didn't answer your question yet. You're going to have to wait a minute. All right. We'll get to it here. All right. So let's talk about an active shooter event. They are very, very unpredictable. If you go back and look at Columbine, they came in, started shooting, they got to the cafeteria, and they actually had conversations with some of the people in the cafeteria. Then they started shooting again, then conversation, went back and forth. Changes by the second. They are very dynamic, those situations. What does that mean? For some people, things seem to slow down and go in slow motion. For other people, what do? Speed up and go very, very quickly. There's one thing that all of them have in common, and that is that they normally require the involvement of law enforcement to bring it to an end. So what does that mean? What is the most important thing we can do? Call 911. Okay, that's definitely the most important thing. Is there anyone else you should call? Well, I'm just saying if it happened in the church, are there other people that may need to be notified so that we can, make sure we lock down doors and things of that nature? Do we have those numbers available to us, or, do we know who to contact? How would that be communicated? Just a thought. Not only when you look at it in an environment such as this, but what about yourself if you're out at a mall or hospitals or any kind of things like that? One of the most dangerous places is actually what? Hospitals. Why? No, the emergency room. I bring my daughter in, and she's crying, and she's hurt, and things of that nature. What do you mean you're taking her kid before mine? What does everybody go in there with? A lot of anxiety, yeah. Very emotional. Does that make sense? So, to answer the question now, on average nowadays, with the way the police respond, the average response time in an urban environment is normally 10 to 12 minutes. I have done this presentation in parts of the country where I hear Billy Bob lives about a half hour away, so it's going to take a little bit longer, Ray. And he's our local state police officer. So it depends on where you're at, but with the response times and the community generally in this area, we're normally looking 10 to 12 minutes. So what does that mean? Normally I suggest you make decisions that are going to keep you alive for about 15 minutes. If you survive 15 minutes, you've probably what? Survived the event, okay? Another one of my favorite slides. Why do we need to prepare? To stay alive. I like that. What else? To be ready for it. Okay? Plan with an idea of what to do. What did you say?
Shorten the amount of time that it takes you to react.
Okay, all great answers. And it's not that they're wrong or anything of that nature, but what you need to understand, the attacker's prepared. He's got a plan. And what have we done? We don't even talk about it. We're scared to even have that conversation, whether it be in a group like this or at home with our family and our children. So we need to talk about it so that we have an idea of what we need to do. So let's take a look. Generally speaking, the perpetrator's prepared. 37% of incidents last less than 5 minutes. That's because of the next bullet point. Average law enforcement time now is 3 to 5 minutes. So the faster we get that call out, the faster the police arrive, and the sooner it comes to an end. We're going to talk a little bit in detail about this bullet point. What, are there legal and moral obligations? Yours. Do you have a legal or moral obligation? You do. What is it? Shooter comes in right now. Do you have a legal or moral obligation?
Call police.
Okay, call police. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, I asked that question because we're going to be real. Let's say I get shot. You look like a big, strong guy. I get shot. We're buddies. Our families hang out together. I go down. You going to leave me there? Thanks for killing both of us. And that's the reality. Remember, how long is that person going to be laying there? 10 to 12 minutes. As soon as the police bring it to an end, who's coming in right after them? EMS. So the thing is that we now know it's probably better to leave them there. Let's talk about why, though. Number one, you try to move me. Even though the shooter's not in the area. Ow, that hurts. What's that going to do? Draw the attention. I may bleed faster, which could do more damage than anything else. How fast can you move with an injured person? Not very fast. Oh, and by the way, statistics show that these shooters don't want to waste ammunition. So if they think you're dead and you could play dead, they're probably not going to shoot you again. But if you're helping me move, they know that I'm what? Alive. So, just some thoughts. So just some thoughts there that help you to understand. What about moral? Oh, let's go back to that for just a minute. That being said, you know now the best thing to do is what? Leave me there. Are you two married? Your wife gets shot. Are you going to leave her? I wouldn't either. But you see where I'm going? So even though we know, so we have to take that into account, that even though we know what we're supposed to do, the reality is that if it's my wife or children, I'm not going to leave them there. I'm going to do something. So just, we got to talk about the reality of it. Okay. Moral, what about, there's a daycare here and there's a child care facility, right? Preschool. What are you going to do with the children? I've had some parents say, I'm going to go grab my kid and go home. Well, the thing is, are they going to unlock it for you? No, they're not. They shouldn't. Why? How do they know that the shooter's not hiding out of sight, holding a gun on you? They open it up to let the parent in, and now shoot. So again, these are things that have all been thought out by a lot of people and planned out. So just some interesting statistics. All right, we're going to play, hold on for a second, Vince, hold on. We're going to play the video. It's called Options for Consideration. It's about 3.5 minutes, very well put together, and it talks about the 3 options that you need to consider for almost any active shooter situation. Go ahead, Vince.
We have an active shooter. Stand by for further information.
Tragedies such as the 2007 mass shooting on the campus of Virginia Tech, the 2009 shooting at the Fort Hood, Texas military post, and the 2011 attempted assassination of Representative Gabrielle Giffords at a public appearance in Arizona are all examples of active shooter situations. An active shooter is an individual actively...
Oops, I'm sorry. I accidentally hit that. Let me get that started back up. You got it, Vince? Yeah. Thank you.
Turn your microphone off for a moment.
We have an active shooter. Stand by for further information.
Tragedies such as the 2007 mass shooting on the campus of Virginia Tech, the 2009 shooting at the Fort Hood, Texas military post, and the 2011 attempted assassination of Representative Gabrielle Giffords at a public appearance in Arizona are all examples of active shooter situations. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people inside an occupied structure or outside in a populated area. In most cases, there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. It is important to be prepared for such an event. Make it a practice to identify potential escape routes and have a plan in mind, even if you are just visiting a facility. In the event of a shooting at your location, you must quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your own life. You will need to determine if the best course of action is to evacuate or to hide. Call 911 when it is safe to do so. If there is an accessible escape route, attempt to evacuate. Be sure to leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible, but do not attempt to move wounded people. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Warn individuals not to enter an area where the active shooter may be, and follow the instructions of any police officers. If evacuation is not the best option, find a place to hide where the shooter is less likely to find you. And be sure your hiding place does not trap or restrict you or your options for movement. Consider the difference between cover and concealment. Cover will protect you from gunfire, and concealment will hide you from the view of the shooter. Quickly choose the best option. If you are caught out in the open and cannot conceal yourself or take cover, you might consider trying to overpower the shooter with whatever means are available. To protect your hiding place, lock the door if you can. Block the door with heavy furniture and close, cover, and move away from windows. Hide behind large items such as cabinets or desks. Remain quiet. Silence your cell phone and/or pager. Even the vibration setting can give away a hiding position. When you call 911, remember to tell the operator the location of the active shooter. If there are multiple shooters, physical description of and number of weapons held by the shooter, as well as the number of potential victims at the location. When law enforcement arrives on the scene, their primary goal is to eliminate the threat and stop the shooter as soon as possible. First responders will not be able to stop to help injured persons until the environment is safe. Knowing what to expect will help keep you calm and allow law enforcement to quickly neutralize the threat. Officers may arrive in teams with tactical equipment such as vests, helmets, and rifles. They will need to take command of the situation. Expect to experience officers shouting orders and even pushing people to the ground for their safety. It is possible that officers from multiple jurisdictions will arrive on the scene. When law enforcement officials arrive, it is important that you keep your hands visible at all times. Avoid making any sudden movements. Avoid pointing, screaming, and/or yelling. Put down any items. Immediately raise your hands and spread your fingers. Remain calm and follow instructions. Do not stop to ask officers for help when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which officers are entering the location. For more awareness resources, please visit dhs.gov/critical infrastructure.
All right, what do you think of the video?
Yeah, good.
Those are your three options. What are they?
Call 911. Hide.
It's you run, hide, or flight. Okay. You'll hear evade. There's different terminology people utilize. We'll talk about each one. You need to know where your emergency exits are, where you're commonly at. You're not going to know them all the time. I will tell you that I never used to really keep track of them. I do a little bit more so now. I was at a college where my daughter was attending. We're staying in a hotel, and this hotel had signs everywhere that said no smoking. Guess what I could smell everywhere? Smoke. It was a 3-story hotel. It was wood framed. I made sure I knew where the emergency stairwells were. Absolutely. Now, it says leave personal belongings behind. That's in there because of Columbine. There was a kid underneath one of the tables. One of the shooters was on top. They knew they were there. They were talking to each other and stuff. Finally, the kid under the table couldn't take it anymore. He took off running. Stopped, went back under and grabbed his book bag. Yeah, so, and it's real common, but what happens is when you have stress and anxiety, your mind doesn't think properly. Why evacuate regardless of others agree to follow? Well, in that first 15 minutes, who's responsible for you? You. Your decision to leave may be the right one, but it could also be the wrong one. My decision to stay could be the right one, could be the wrong one. By the way, Just because you choose to run or hide doesn't mean you have to stay with it. If you hide and you know the shooter's out of the area and you know you can get out, then take off running. If all of a sudden you see the shooter, well then go back into hiding. So, and we say that because some people think that once you choose one method, that's the only thing you can do. You can go back and forth. Right? If possible, do help others to escape. When safe, call 911. Why when it's safe?
Tip off your position.
If I'm trying to call 911, what am I not looking at? What's going on around me? So imagine if there was a fire here. I'm not going to stand here and call 911. What am I going to do?
Run.
Leave the area. When I get to a safe area, now it's the same mentality. That's all. All right? When you hide or take cover, out of the shooter's sight is cover. Okay? Or I'm sorry, it's concealment. If you can find protection, whether it's behind a cinder block wall, maybe even a heavy filing cabinet full of papers, that is called cover. And what that'll do is it may stop the ammunition or bullets from getting through and injuring you. A lot of people say we need to add more locked doors. What do you think about that? Good or bad? Oh yeah, he can shoot it, but chances are he's not going to waste time shooting through every locked door. There's problems with that because when I go out and do these presentations, people go, we got to add locks, we got to add locks, none of our doors are locked. Well, here's the problem. You get into the locked room. You're standing outside, let me in, let me in. You're going to let her in? If there's a locked room, it either has a key card or a key. Boom, I shoot you, I grab your key card, now what can I do? Get in. So the idea is they can help, but you just need to be aware of how the technology has limitations. Okay? Silence your cell phone, stay quiet, but be ready. The last option, this is my favorite, okay? Fight. I've had a gun pulled on me 4 or 5 times. We're going to talk about one, but I'm a black belt. Dave mentioned it. So, all right. Those 4 or 5 times I had a gun pulled on me, I never physically defended myself. I always verbally de-escalated. But let's talk about the mentality you need. It's a last resort. Only when your life's in danger, you have no other choice. You know he's going to shoot you, you got to do something. You need to incapacitate the shooter. How many of you can incapacitate the shooter? Nobody ever puts their hand up, or if they do, it's kind of like, but you could, and I know you could. And you do too, you just don't realize it. We don't want to think about it, we don't want to go there. How do I know you could? Children, grandchildren, anybody?
Yeah,
How old are your grandchildren?
27.
Do you have great-grandchildren then? Anybody got 3 or 4-year-olds? Okay, so you have a 3 or 4-year-old. You get a guy, 6'8", 320 pounds, he attacks you, are you scared? Don't lie to me.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, I am too. All right? He goes after your grandchildren, you scared?
I know him.
Oh, you see, isn't that weird how everybody changes? Oh, and that's that whole fight or flight thing going on. There could be 5 guys that big. They done. It's over. They got to go get more. But that's the mentality you need to understand, the mindset you need to be in. Your actions need to be aggressive. Improvised weapons. What do we have in here that we could use as weapons? Chairs. That's an easy one.
Right.
What else? You have. I don't see no scissors. No, I want real stuff. Ooh, pens. You could use a pad of paper as a weapon? Distraction, maybe. Very good. Keys. Keep going. What else do we have in the room?
There's 20 hammers in that closet.
He's scaring me. Not that there's hammers in the closet. There's 20 of them.
They've talked about this.
All right. So what I'm trying to point out is there's always something what? Available. I've got a belt on. I could take that off, use that. I could take my glasses off, break an arm off, use it the same way you would a pen or a pencil. So there's always something available. You just need to think about it. Yell and throw items. Does it make a difference what you yell? No. Yes. Ladies, have you ever taken a rape prevention class or anything?
No.
Oh, well, if you're attacked, they tell you to holler what? Fire, because nobody wants to help you, but everybody wants to come and see the fire. Okay? Active shooter, I don't suggest we holler fire. Not a good idea. Okay?
Yeah.
Good. Sam, I haven't seen you since high school. How you doing, buddy? Good. What do you notice? For a split second, what did everybody in the room do? He knows it? How much time do you need to distract an active shooter? A fraction of a second. A fraction. Because here's the thing. Somebody in decent shape can run a 100-yard dash in 10 seconds. That means I'm covering 10 yards in 1 second. 3, 6, 9, 12. 15. Look at how much time, distance that is. You only need to get that guy distracted for a split second. So, I was actually doing this for another church one time, and there was a woman in there, and she started singing. And everybody laughed. They thought it was hysterical. I was like, awesome. Because this shooter is planned for when he busts in the room, he knows you're going to swear at him, he knows you're going to cry, he knows you're going to scream. But what is he not planning on? You see what? Yeah. So just some interesting things. Whatever you do, commit your action. Remember, there's no rules. All right. So I want to bring this up real quickly. Now, we've gotten better in the last several years. These are the 3 groups that are going to be responding in the event of an active shooter. This group's pretty good. They got a plan. They know what they're going to do. What they've done a really good job over the last few years in getting out to the community and helping us to understand what they will do. Does that make sense? Okay. We need to know that so we can prepare. Like I said, they now have told us 10 to 12 minutes, it's going to be over. Just get the call out to us. What about the building or the facility? Not just this building or facility, other facilities, your work. Have they got a plan? What about you and your family? Have you talked about what you should do? Nobody ever does. So what happens is that they do a really good job, they do a decent job, but what do? We don't really do a whole lot, do we? How many of you have had a conversation with your family about it? No. Think about that. All right. So, building response, you're going to contact 911. Here's the thing. We're always contacting 911. If you call us and tell us you contacted 911, guess what? We're still calling 911. What if she told you that she called 911?
I'll call it too.
Why?
Just make sure.
Why? That's right, but why? Police get 1 call, they respond differently than if they get 15 or 20 calls. If they get 1, they think it's probably a prank. Okay? They get 15 or 20, everybody and their brother's coming. Okay? We're going to put our facilities action plan into motion. We're going to alert administrators and potential victims. We're going to assist in evacuating. Remember, and what we tell people in security, it is not our job to die so that you live. Here's the thing. We want to help you live, but if I'm dead or injured, how many people can I help? Can't help it. So my job is to get out, but try to bring as many people with me and assist as we can. Does that make sense? And provide that safety. So assist in evacuating or hiding. We're going to help. We're going to control the ingress or egress. Normally we don't let people in, but you will always be allowed out. Okay? Make sure you report the facts. We talked about that, number of shooters, things of that nature. Be prepared to assist. Depending upon the number of victims, we may need some volunteers. All right, at this point, Vince, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you. We'll be back a little bit later. You're all set there?
Yes, of course.
Right side forward, left side reverse.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vince Genualdi. As Dave mentioned, Mike? Okay. As Dave mentioned, I'm a former law enforcement officer. I was on the police department for 24 years. 29, if you count my auxiliary days, part-time and everything else. So lots of law enforcement experience. Now I'm a team member at Titan, in charge of Director of Security at Millennial Park. So I was brought here today. I heard Ray was doing the presentation. Dave told me about it, and I'm saying, hey, how about having somebody here to speak about law enforcement? There's always questions about what would a police officer do? What does the police department expect citizens to do during scenarios like this? So does anybody ever hear the terminology rapid deployment? Just off the rapid deployment. Rapid deployment really started in the military. It's a military formation, and it's they deployed their military special forces. And that's the terminology that you'll hear in law enforcement is rapid deployment. Law enforcement started using the terminology rapid deployment to in scenarios like this in active shooters because during the Columbine shooting, as Ray said, it took the SWAT team 3 hours. I believe the shooting started at 11:20, and then the SWAT team entered at 3 p.m. That's how long it took. SWAT teams, everyone knows what a SWAT team, you've heard it, SWAT, the TV show, everything else, everybody knows what SWAT is. Does anybody know how long it takes for a SWAT team to respond to a situation? Approximately 45 to 50 minutes. So by the time we call for a SWAT team, and every suburb has a SWAT team, the bigger communities actually, like Elgin, Aurora, Chicago, actually Skokie by my house, it has a mini SWAT team. But the smaller towns like Hinsdale, we have a local SWAT team for this area. It's probably around 10 to 15 departments that they put a team together, call it a SWAT team, other call it Fiat team. But that's how long it takes because like I said, it's 15 police departments. So Vince is on the SWAT team, and I live in Niles, an hour away or half an hour away. By the time I get a call, or a pager in the old days, by the time I respond to the scene, it takes me an hour. So everybody lives in a different community. You're getting different officers that live all over. I mean, we can live all the way up to Wisconsin. So we get the call, and then the SWAT team gets together. We'll say, hey, we're all coming to the Union Church here, and we all meet up here. So by the time everybody gets together, it takes 45 to 50 minutes. And like how Ray said, you know, it's over. Active shooter, it's over. So we started training with rapid deployment, and it's a formation that we do. You saw some of the pictures out there. It's a group of 4 officers who get into a diamond formation, one in the front, one in the back, and one on the side, each side. And our whole purpose when we respond to a scenario with active shooter is to surround and contain. We basically locate, isolate, and stop the shooter. That's our main goal when we're responding. So when you're dialing 911 in schools and churches, that's exactly what we're doing. We're responding here, and we're entering, and we're listening for gunfire, and we're going immediately towards the gunfire. Now, a lot of people always ask, and I think Ray brought it up, what happens if somebody's screaming, I've been shot, you know, do the police stop and assist with medical help? No, we don't. If we hear gunfire, we're going towards the gunfire. Go ahead.
Why don't the police go directly?
Directly?
Not wait for SWAT, just go.
No, we do. So that's my point. So nowadays, since Columbine, we've trained called rapid deployment. So nowadays, yes, that's what we do. In every squad car, you'll see long rifles, you'll see machine guns, you'll see body armor, and that's every officer on the street is now prepared. So yes, every officer is ready as a SWAT. Basically, we put a SWAT team together within our community. So Hinsdale Police Department, when they respond here, as soon as 3 or 2 officers come on site, they're listening for gunfire, asking everybody, where's the shooter? And that's where they're going. They're going towards the threat and stopping the shooting. So once we secure and secure the perimeter, then that's where we start evacuating people out, making sure there's no other offenders in the building or in the school. And that's when we have our emergency personnel come in and start treating all the victims. Rapid deployment. One of the things that I brought up in one of my school, I mentioned to Ray earlier today, and again, I'm not hired by them, but it's, I think, a good program that I probably should bring up, and you should think about it. It's called Share 911. That's something, a program, a two-way device that it is used nowadays from other communities, other schools that are using, and it's a matter of clicking on a cell phone and evacuating or making a lockdown of your school facility. So basically, if we have a Share 911 program in the school or this church, the principal, if they hear a gunfire or they have information of somebody in the school who's not supposed to be there, everybody carries a cell phone, and it's an app on your phone, and you basically hit it, and actually puts the school on a lockdown and notifies all the schools and the principal and everybody else who they've programmed in the Share 911. It also notifies our local police department. So in Niles, that's what we basically did. We implemented the Share 911 with other schools and high schools, and they're currently using. So that's another device to look into, other plans. So that's something else. We have tools that we break down doors or use a chair. No, we don't. We same thing. We have breaching tools and everything else. So that's how we get in. So, but go ahead.
Are you guys going to discuss what we would do in a hostage situation? I mean, I'm sure there are situations where the bad guy has hostages and the police aren't just going to start.
Can I jump in for a second on that? When we talk about active shooter, once you mention hostage, that's a completely different.
Different situation.
Yes. So like when you heard about what happened down in Florida at that nightclub, that became a hostage situation, and that's why the police didn't breach right away. So does that help you to understand? I'm sorry.
So as we said, response time in law enforcement 3 to 5 minutes. They talk about here our contact strike team, and that's exactly what I was talking about, a rapid deployment team that we actually encounter. Now we have a different. We've assessed what's been going on around the world. As I mentioned earlier today, rapid deployment is a team of 4, sometimes 3. And there was a scenario with, I forgot, I think it was in Parkland, where the SRO was seen on video. You probably heard of it. And he was waiting outside while the shooting was going on inside. And he didn't go inside and go after the shooter. I don't know if you remember that. So now in law enforcement, we have trained differently. Not because of that, we've thought about it, but that's a perfect scenario why we don't wait for the rest of our officers to arrive. If I'm outside and I'm the school resource officer and I hear shooting, I go after the threat. So now law enforcement, if they hear shooting, if it's only one officer on the scene, he is trained to go inside and find the shooter and stop the threat and stop basically in saving lives and stop the carnage, basically. So that's a different approach and training that we're doing in law enforcement nowadays. Before it was a 4-man team, and now whoever arrives goes in there immediately. Remain calm. It's easy for all of us to say, and I'll be honest with you, the cops are afraid too. Cops lose it too. There's a lot of screaming, a lot of crying, a lot of emotions. There's a lot of children who are might be deceased. So it's hard for us too. So we do rapid deployment training twice a year. We try to. One thing that we've incorporated in our town, and we ask other local municipalities to do the same, call your chief of police from Hinsdale and say, hey, we would like to have a drill, just like a fire drill, at our local school or church with your local police department. And on vacation, when all the kids are on vacation, it only takes a day, and what they'll do is they'll run their rapid deployment training in conjunction with school officials. So you will see firsthand how law enforcement will arrive at the scene, what they expect, what they'll be screaming at you, and you'll be trained in the same way as they are. So you will know exactly what to expect when law enforcement arrives. So that's my kind of suggestion, to contact your local police department. They're always looking for buildings to do their training in. We're always calling schools and asking when you're closed. So that's another training thing that you can do with your schools and church groups. I believe that's it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this slide. This basically runs through, you have your action plan, communicate, put your action plan into place, building goes into lockdown, safety team measures, and then the thing is post-incident recovery. We talk about the event. What about after an event? What do you got to consider after an event? Well, if there's people shot, guess what? It's a crime scene. And if it's a crime scene, you may not be allowed back in for hours, days, or maybe even a week. If it's a facility like this and there's children that have been shot, what are we going to get a lot of? Teddy bears, cards, candles.
Media.
Pardon?
Media.
Media. Now, that's a great point.
Yeah, great point.
Who's in charge of speaking to the media? Who's a representative from the facility here?
Ed.
Where's Ed?
That's back in here.
Where's he at? Oh, can I borrow this? Where is he at? In the back here? So, is it true that 3 people were killed today?
I can't comment on that right.
Why not? What are you trying to hide? Oh, isn't that how the media sometimes may get? So how do we handle the media? What we recommend is that you ask for a business card and you'll forward it to the people to be able to answer their questions. Can I have your card? I'll get it to the people to be able to answer that. In the meantime, please step over here. What they found, though, is that post-incident, for every person shot, they average 1 to 2 tons of teddy bears and memorabilia that people leave. Who's going to clean that up? Where is it going to be? So there's a lot of things. Oh, you mentioned the media, Dave. A week later, the media is going to come back. A month later. What about on the year anniversary? So this is going to go on for a long time. So just some thoughts there that I just wanted to touch base on. And I'm going to give it back to you at this point. This was yours too, right?
Thanks, guys. So you mentioned Penny, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Really, the phases never stop. This is something that should be continuous education. Vince mentioned other training opportunities, maybe with local law enforcement. We have developed kind of a training presentation for what to do next beyond run, hide, fight. What we showed you today was kind of our initial active shooter training. There's others modules, but the point is that you've started the conversation. Have those conversations with your family and yourself. What we're really trying to get everyone to do is the train response. Be ready, have that survival reaction, that survival mindset. Take charge, and that last bullet point: live, win, live. Right? The untrained response, panic, shock, doing nothing, will not help you live and win. So I think we've taken a nice step tonight, having everybody here, hopefully giving you guys some things to think about, maybe some questions that you can take back to your groups and committees as you work to further develop the programs. If we click on the next slide, we have highlighted here some of the security enhancement that Sharon and Penny and the team have worked with us on. They mentioned them earlier, but we have duress alarms installed in areas of worship throughout, one at the lectern, one in the back, and one handheld that call directly to local law enforcement, 911. We also have upgraded the camera system. There's 2 cameras in this room. We've added a camera outside on the north side to the other cameras that we already had. The camera system itself was updated, the infrastructure, to allow remote viewing by those with the proper credentials and to allow cameras to be installed with greater surveillance capabilities. The access control system was expanded, so we added readers. The church has added readers to the main points of ingress and egress so that they can lock down the building in a case of active shooter. And that remote lockdown, Vince mentioned with the other technology, is also now being configured for certain administrators that they can have the ability, no matter where they are, to lock down the building from their device. So those are some of the enhancements that the church has been taking to protect the property and the community members. So with that, yeah.
How useful is the first thing to have a transmitter that's fixed? I mean, is that something that is used a lot?
They're all actually wireless, so they can all be moved. The first 2 locations where we mounted them, but they can be taken off. So if the, if somebody giving worship wants to take them off and walk around with it, they can. Similarly, the ushers can take them, and we have the 3rd one that's just kind of available as well.
The person that's on the committee that handles ushers, when are they going to tell the usher where this device is?
We wanted to do this first.
Uh-huh.
We'll train you guys. Show you where they are and how to use them. It's not hard, it's 2 buttons.
Right, and 2 buttons to ensure that that you really meant to push it. So 2 buttons, authentication, and it's going to call 911.
We're still working out some kinks, so everything's up and running now, right?
Yes.
So now would be a great time for you let me know and we'll start the,
So that when the present people leave, that there's a continuous, I mean, what if you all were,
Yeah, no, Sharon has significant knowledge of the system, as does, the pastors. Mike has a lot of knowledge, and Penny, and they're
oh,
going to be
I
here.
understand that,
Yeah,
but I
so-
mean, to keep this going, I mean, all the people here, fine.
It's now a committee function of the Buildings and Grounds Committee.
Okay.
The same way that
Yeah.
they keep the water from the
Okay.
corner in the road.
That's why,
This is one of our systems.
so that's their,
Yeah.
okay, that's all I need.
I'm gonna start wearing a badge.
You can wear a hard hat.
All right, we're almost right on our hour. We timed it well. Any other questions? Yes?
I and my other youth leaders, we walk the church on Sunday nights to make sure it's locked down. And I know we have 2 doors that will automatically lock down, but that doesn't address the doors in the gathering space that don't shut all the way. It doesn't address the doors on either side of the sanctuary that don't shut properly and we find open frequently. So I'm kind of concerned. I mean, it's great that we have these 2 doors that will open and lock, but there are a lot of doors that are being opened and left open by whoever opened them. And they're not making sure, and I mean, it's a concern.
Yeah,
Because
we were very worried about that, and.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question was, and it's great feedback, and this is why you have these types of events, is that you share. And I'll do it for you over the microphone. Is that why the youth groups are doing, the youth ministers are doing walks to clear the property? They're identifying doors that are being left open or may not have closed, and then I would imagine you're securing them, right? Which is great. But that feedback is very helpful and something that Sharon and the team is addressing.
Did address that, and you've got to keep us informed. And we are respond to every door, and you see that little thing at the top of the door, it's the metal arm, that's called a closer. When they get used, or they have to be adjusted, so the closer that properly. And we all have to be cognizant of how we do that, because that is going to be better space in the door. I just have a short. Weather stripping issues, some will close it. So there's all the documentation, the weather changes things, and so we have to stay on top of it.
What about the doors that are manually unlocked? Maybe that then they'll close all the time, but they'll be unlocked.
Every outside door must be locked at all times. The doors that like close are the doors outside. So if they're open, somebody's still around.
Yeah.
You see them open.
So let me explain this. So everyone in the room and anybody you talk to, you should never key open a door with, if any of you have one of these square keys, you should never key open one of those doors, one of our doors from the outside anymore. That's what the entire system was meant to correct. People keying those doors open and leaving them open and not doing it anymore. If you still have one of these keys, I guess we haven't done this yet, but part of the plan is that by installing this new system, we're going to collect all of these keys so that people can't key open the doors. So don't ever key open the doors, and tell everybody else on your ministry not to do that either. And remember that we're going to be collecting these because the new system is you're supposed to use the fob instead to get in. So that's the way that's supposed to work. Yes, we know it's not 100% complete yet, Matt and Cindy, but that is what we are working toward very soon. To Cindy's original point, I have talked with Ed about that in the past week. All of those doors, like the doors in the gathering place that don't close properly, the doors on the north side, the left doors you face the building on the north side of the building that don't close properly, the doors at the top of the ramp that don't close properly. I've talked to the door farthest to the west of the 4 doors on 3rd Street that doesn't click closed properly. I've talked to Ed about all those in the past week. He knows about them all. He's trying to take corrective action, but hasn't managed to finish it all yet.
But every door, you can always get out from
Yes. Nothing changes that. You can still always get out. Those are all doors that are supposed to just simply close naturally when you let go of them, but they don't actually do that. They can still all be open from the inside.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment. I don't know, a year or so ago, I don't know if you remember, there was a robbery at a jewelry store on Washington Street. My office is right above that jewelry store, and somebody from my office was the first person to call 911, and the response was, when she said, there's somebody shooting downstairs, the response was, how do you know? So what he said about multiple calls to 911 is really important.
Okay, I want to piggyback on that a little bit, just so you know. That is a standard question that 911 has been taught to ask. Now, wait a minute. You need to understand why. Are firearms allowed in this facility? Okay. Now, what happens is, maybe I've got a concealed carry, I didn't see it or whatever, and I'm walking around, and it's right here, and somebody sees that I've got a gun. They call police, and they go, there's a guy in the church with a firearm. So they want to make sure that they're not overreacting and sending the cavalry, because it actually happened in Schaumburg, was it last year or the year before? There was an electrician actually that had a glue gun, and somebody saw it and said there was a guy in the building with a gun. 10 different departments responded. So they want to make sure. So yeah, so please understand from their perspective why they ask some of the questions they ask. Any other questions?
Real quick, does everybody understand also off-duty police officers and retirees like myself, we can carry guns even if you have that sticker. So like Ray said, there might be somebody sitting next to you in a pew that might have a gun, but it might be a police officer or a retired police officer. So that's why they ask many questions. And everybody has a different opinion or sees a different thing. So we encourage everybody to call many times, and we're going to ask different questions and then, put everything together and try to figure it out.
So if we see somebody that has a gun, like a concealed carry gun,
yes.
What do we do? Do we
You call.
Ask them? Or?
No. Absolutely not.
But if they're dropping off a preschool, they might be a daddy or a mommy.
No, as everyone says, the best thing to do is dial 911. There's nothing wrong with dial 911. We have many burglaries in our neighborhoods. And then all of a sudden somebody's house gets burglarized, and then we start knocking on doors, and we're like, you know what? I saw a car parked in front of their house, but I didn't know who it was, and I didn't call 911. And we encourage people to call 911. It's free. Call 911. We encourage everybody. Call 911. Oh, I see a suspicious car. There's a guy who's sitting next to me in a pew who had a gun. Now we're going to start asking you questions. Well, how did he look like? Was he nicely dressed? Da-da-da. A lot of questions, and we'll figure it out. So when we respond, we will know right away, and we'll handle it. But no, do not confront anybody. Absolutely not.
One last question. Go ahead.
If